What's going on, everybody? This is Steven Field coming back at you with a brand new film review, and unfortunately for us guys, we've kind of arrived at what many consider to be the bastard child of the Scream franchise, and that's Scream 3. Now, I think after the first two Scream films, we had really high expectations, especially, the belief going around was that this would be the final film of the franchise, possibly. Now, after this, we know the franchise would go away for at least a good long while, and yeah, it did. But for many of us, we thought this would be it. And honestly, for what was considered by many to be the last film of the franchise, it didn't really live up to expectation, and I'll get into why. But like I said, when the first two films set a bar that's so high, it's pretty hard to live up to that bar. But at least, thinking off the top of my head, the things that I thought Scream 3 did well, even though the list is pretty short, bringing back, the original three, bringing back Dewey, Gale, and Sidney. Although I don't like the fact that Sidney's basically kind of kept in the background for the first two acts of the film, and you don't really unleash her till the third act, which... honestly, going on that's one of the main positives of the film is that third act when it's balls to the walls, and it's once again Sidney taking the killer head on and basically being one step ahead of the killer at every turn. Some of the kills are pretty decent, and honestly, outside of that, guys, there's not really a whole lot that this film did good. Like, they tried to further establish, that whole world within a world aspect that Scream had become famous for by this time. That even that they did, it was pretty lackluster. Having the film Stab 3 be based on the first Woodsboro murders, and having these kind of B or C list actors play the Woodsboro characters was kind of wishy-washy, just because the acting was not very good. Outside of Sidney and even Patrick Dempsey, and that kind of sucks that even Dewey and Gale fall by the wayside acting performances, to say the least, because the whole aspect of would you just get the two characters together got pretty old by this point, and then come to find out in a piece of the film that they were together for a good long while, and it kind of sucks that for fans like us who actually wanted to see the two characters get together and we didn't get to actually see that, was a little disappointing. And all the actors who play the Woodsboro characters were not very good. You got the token black guy who, of course, has to make, his typical jokes like, oh, you think guys like me can just throw away jobs? And the girl who ends up turning out to have had relations with the big producer, Milton. I don't know, guys. There's not really a whole lot positive that I can say about this film. It's when you look back at like the worst films in the major franchises. When you think of like Halloween Resurrection or Halloween 5, you think of Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. And like Seed of Chucky, Jason Goes to Hell. When I compare it to those horror films, it's significantly higher than those, because those are like the all-time lows for those franchises. But especially when I compare it to the other three films in the Scream franchise, it's way down on the totem pole. And honestly, I don't know how long of a review this is going to be. Like I said, at least they brought back, the original three characters, which, yeah, they had the balls to kill off Randy, but you figured with Randy's rules of the trilogy, this could basically be the final film, and, we need to stop at all costs to make this a balls-to-the-wall sequel. That they would have killed off at least one, if not two, of the major three. But it's like they play it too close to the vest. They're worried about, fan backlash that, the fans don't want them to take out any of the major three, but at the same time, the fans are like, well, we do, but we don't. We want you guys to show that you at least have the balls to do something that we're not expecting, and that's been one of the major gripes with the franchise, that they haven't kind of pushed that envelope a little bit. And if I'm being honest, guys, the whole reveal of Roman Bridges, the movie director, being Sidney's brother, it's like, yeah, when I watched it for the first time, it definitely kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. But watching the film through the years, I didn't really care how this film tried to not necessarily erase, but kind of alter events from the first film. Like, oh, Roman was the one that was kind of the instigator of Billy and Stu committing the crimes that they did, and he's basically set the events of the entire franchise. And I didn't really care for that. You know, you're making him out to seem like a big criminal mastermind, almost like a James Bond villain, so to speak. And I don't really care when films try to alter events of a film that is very beloved, and a film that's much better than the film in hand. It was definitely a little shocking when I saw it for the first time, but looking back at it now over the years, it definitely has lost pretty much all of its luster. And then to top it all off, you know, the Dewey kind of reverts back to that goofy character he was in the first film when he notices that he's unloading an entire clip of a gun into Roman, and he notices that his bullets aren't affecting Roman, and Sidney's trying to yell him, you know, Dewey, shoot him in the head, and it takes him up until like probably what was the very last bullet in the clip to finally shoot him in the head. You know, it's very silly, and it shows you how much they reverted back to Dewey being that goofy character that we knew from the first film. And then, you know, Gale kind of reverting back to that somewhat egotistical, always chasing the story journalist that was probably the main reason why we were somewhat distant from her in the first two films. Like, yeah, she really started to revert away from that in Scream 2, and then to see her go back to that was a bit frustrating. She didn't really have too much of a character arc, and honestly, I've never been the biggest fan of Gale as a character. I attach myself to Sidney. I started to like Dewey more as the franchise went on, mainly because of the camaraderie between him and Sidney, as kind of like Sidney being a surrogate daughter to Dewey, and them having this camaraderie ever since the events of the first film. But Gale, I've never really kind of attached myself to. I always saw her as like the egotistical journalist who was always chasing the story, and she cared more about furthering herself than actually putting an end to these murders and to helping everyone at all costs. So that's kind of bugging me a bit, but that's just kind of how I've always seen her. And honestly, guys, there's not really a whole lot for me to say about this film. Luckily, a decade later, we got the film that we got with Scream 4, but because if they would have left this as the final film in the franchise, the Scream franchise, I don't know, would have gone down in almost infamy, really, despite the fact that the first two films were in such high praise. That, like I said, this film is really the bastard child, and it could have easily changed the Scream franchise forever in the worst way, but luckily it did not. Overall, guys, I'm gonna give Scream 3 a 4 out of 10. There's some things it did well, and everything else just was like it's fall by the wayside. Very paint by numbers Scream film, really. It did the usual things that it needed to do right, and then the other things it just really fell on its face, like having Carrie Fisher be the big celebrity cameo, and the whole thing about introducing Randy's sister, which is a character we had never seen up until that one scene of the film, and then we haven't seen her since. Randy posting what looks like almost like a eulogy tape, even though he looks like 5 years older, and establishing the whole, rules of the trilogy. One of the staples of a Scream film is like you have to establish the rules, quote unquote. So all in all, guys, it's not the worst film in the world. It's not the worst thing compared to the other films that I mentioned, but it's definitely, compared to the other 3 films in this franchise, it's definitely lackluster. But thank you guys so much for listening. If you haven't gotten a chance to check out my first 2 Scream reviews, definitely go and check those out. Hit the like button, share, subscribe, share any way you can on any social media platform you feel like. Look forward to my Scream 4 review tomorrow. I couldn't think of a better place to do my Scream 4 review on Halloween, and then maybe a day or 2 after that, expect my ranking of the Scream franchise. And thank you guys so very much for listening. I'll see you guys next time.